Strong and ever reaching for the sky that is a wall. Toutes les femmes dans le monde doivent supporter. Et si elles se tiennent à carreau, elles ne peuvent pas être sur une même valeur égale. Body may be broken. Your lips, they may not speak. For some things cannot be spoken. Time will not forget about the price you had to pay for the greed of man did not respect. Oh, the Congolese woman. Alors, la chanson de parler des femmes congolaises.
Hello, hello. Greetings, everyone. Seems like we are struggling with the sound, and I can hear as I speak. I don't know if everybody's hearing the interpretation every time, and I don't know that is what it should be. I thought I wouldn't hear the translator as I speak, but I can hear them. Maybe somebody can help us with the technical side. But while they do that, I want to first of all thank and welcome everyone who joined us today. People who are joining us on the Zoom who registered and are here with us. Who are joining us through Facebook Live.
Les personnes sur Facebook.
Who are listening to us through those channels. My name is Kumba Toure, and I am one of the coordinators of African Society for Peace, Justice, and Dignity. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to this beautiful, amazing panel of people that anyway I will take a few seconds of my time to thank them, and for Africans Rising to be associated with this initiative, and going all the way, I guess, to the end of October. Please follow us on our social medias, on our website. Congo Week is starting on 19th of October, and we'll be, on it throughout. There'll be many. Please go and check it. Many activities. This is the kickoff. Simply Africans Rising is a movement, a Pan-African movement, bringing together. It's a young movement. I want to say maybe just 3 years. And a growing movement, today more than 800 organizations, many of them networks of organizations, of civil society organizations. And when we say civil society organization, we mean not only NGOs, associations, but also workers' union, religious group, small and large group, you name it. And it is really a movement to build solidarity. Built with the understanding that as Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, we have to come together and support each other. That every time an African is touched anywhere on the globe, all of us are touched, and there are no strangers among us. So you can find more information about Africans Rising, join the movement, read the Kilimanjaro Declaration, support it. I will stop here. I'll stay with you for a Q&A. If there are specific questions about Africans Rising, feel free, to put it in the chat, and we'll be happy to respond to it. And I'll just turn it over to my beautiful, beautiful sister, Emira Woods, to carry us through the panel. Thank you, Emira.
Thank you so much, Kumba. An honor to be on. I am moderating, but we are really, truly going to pull it back and bring us to the words of the phenomenal Nobel laureate, Dr. Mukweji. I think that film clip will come first, and then I'll come back on. Thank you so much. As we wait for the film clip, please then let me just...
Alors que nous attendons que...
Please go ahead.
Emira, that's just a translator. You shouldn't be hearing them, but they're translating what you're saying.
Okay. I was just filling time before the film clip comes on. So if that's ready, we can just go to that directly.
Alors, si le clip est prêt, nous pouvons continuer.
All right, the technology will work, you all. But family, let me take this time to just say welcome. People are joining and sharing in the chat where they're joining from. Others who aren't on Zoom are joining on various lives. We are so honored to have you all here. We are multiple languages on the Africans Rising page, streaming live in English. On the Friends of the Congo Facebook page, we're streaming live in French. And this event is sponsored by Africans Rising, by Friends of the Congo, also by the African Great Lakes Action Network and the Black Alliance for Peace. We are truly, truly honored that all of you have taken time to join us today. And we're especially grateful to all who are providing technical support and translation services, to HMG TV that is also streaming this live on their TV networks globally. And we remind everybody, for your privacy and security, that this session is recorded and is being publicly available. So we're trying to begin with a film clip. We'll try to go to that again, and then we'll come back to our phenomenal panelists for what will be an interactive discussion on the pursuit for justice in the Great Lakes region of Africa.
There's no sound for the audience.
Powerful film clip. So sorry, the sound didn't transfer properly, but hopefully people can go back and revisit that clip. It is an incredible reminder of why the Great Lakes is so important. The Great Lakes region of Africa is the source of so much. When you think about all of the resources, coltan, gold, diamond, the Great Lakes has been a region that has, from the beginning of the African continent's existence, been vital for the survival not only of people in that region, but of the world. And we come together today to focus on the Great Lakes region at a critical time. We are underscoring at this moment the importance of peace and justice in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but in the Great Lakes region overall. We are here to mark the 10th anniversary of a UN mapping report on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The UN report in the wake of armed aggression and war that mapped serious violations of human rights and injustices, violations of international humanitarian law committed within the Democratic Republic of the Congo because richness of the soil. We are also here today to mark 1 month since the kidnapping and detention of Paul Rusesabagina. 1 month since the world watched as what many of us call a hero from the film Hotel Rwanda was literally taken from an airport in Dubai and woke up, as he tells now, woke up. So we are here to really add our voice in the pursuit of justice in the Great Lakes, to calls for his immediate release and return to his family. Unconditional release. That's our call today. So you will hear from a phenomenal list of speakers. I wish we had an hour with each of them, but they will help us as we delve deeper into issues of history, understanding the importance of the Great Lakes region of Africa, issues of accountability. Without accountability, there can be no justice, there can be no peace. We will touch on the role of external geopolitical actors from the US to Europe to elsewhere. And most importantly, a call to action. What is needed now for true justice in the region? So we are so blessed, family, with this panel of phenomenal speakers. I will give you a brief introduction and then we'll be able to hear from each of them directly. Kambale Musavuli, we'll start with him. Comes from the Congo. He is one of the leading voices for peace and justice. He's a social entrepreneur and an international human rights advocate. He's currently working as an analyst at the Center for Research on the Congo. He's a member of Pan-Africanism Today's Secretariat and its West African representative. Currently based in Ghana, we feel like he's a spokesperson on the Congo for Friends of the Congo, but for Pan-Africanism more broadly. And we're so honored to have him here today. Next, we have Claude Gotabuke. Claude is a Rwandicide and war survivor. He is co-founder of one of our sponsoring organizations, the African Great Lakes Action Network. And, you know, he's on everything now, from BBC to National Public Radio here in the US. He's been featured on media across the globe as a spokesperson demanding human rights, human dignity, not only for the Great Lakes, but for the world at large. We also have an incredible journalist, Judy Riviere, who is based in Canada and is the author of the book In Praise of Blood, The Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front. We are to say that the French edition of this book is available this month. So we're also really grateful that she has carved out time to be here today to talk about issues of accountability. Then we have Ni Akwete. Many of you know him well. He has a 4-decade-long career of commitment, as he calls it, to agitating, organizing, and fighting for a radically better treatment of Africans by everybody, from Europeans to Chinese, Americans, and African rulers. Ni is often in global media as well. And he comes with us as a professor at George Washington University, but with many other hats as well. We are so grateful that each of them will be with us. And what we will do is, I'm the moderator here to try to create a space for an interactive dialogue where they will share their insights, and we will also leave plenty of space for questions and response later in the conversation. So family, welcome. And we are going to now turn to our panelists. Let's begin with you, Kambale. Please set the table for us. Tell us a bit of the history of this region, the Great Lakes region. Many of us understand how important and vital this region is. But from your words, tell us a bit about the history of the region, but also of this justice, how it started, and why it's important.
And on this day, I would like to take a pause and think about Frank Lefevre. And the reason why I would like to think about him is a scientist, an American scientist. He was an American scientist who died last year. He was a strong supporter of the Great Lakes region. And his face is coming front and center because on October 1st, 2010, he was with us in front of the United Nations.
Octobre, il était enlevé.
Who were with us. And the people who were with us are Eve Ensler, who at the time was very sick, but she came and stood with us. There were Congolese communities from across the United States, they all came. And that day he was running, stood there the entire day, anticipating the release of the report, where some believe that this report will not come out. But what is this report about? A report leaked in July of 2010 that described the crimes that have been committed in Congo from 1993 to 2003, stating that the crimes committed are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in the competent court. And that's the language that was used in the final report. But what has been happening in the Congo for the past 2 decades, even more? Since 1996, Congo was invaded by 2 of US allies, Rwanda and Uganda. They invaded the Congo twice, in 96 and 98, and have unleashed death of Holocaust proportion. Over 6 million Congolese have lost their lives in this conflict. Resources have been plundered, and the people who have been mostly affected by this are Congolese women and children. Half of the deaths have been children under the age of 5. But since the conflict started in 1996, the call for justice started coming from the Congolese. So even though we have a UN mapping exercise report that was published in 2010, in 2002, the Congolese people themselves, in the inter-Congolese dialogue, was able to say in one of the articles of the dialogue that we needed to create an international tribunal for crimes committed in the DRC. That's 2002. In 2003, strangely enough, the former president, Joseph Kabila, I don't know what took him, he went to the United Nations in September of 2003 at the General Assembly, had made a call himself for the creation of the International Tribunal for Congo. And many other Congolese afterwards have done this call, and this call has been from the Congolese. So 2010 was the international community coming closer to the voice of the Congolese people, saying that we must have justice. And why is that critical? In 1997 and 1998, during the invasion of the Congo, the Rwandan troops committed a massacre in the DRC. They committed many massacres, but the one that's pertinent is the Tingi massacre, where they went after Congolese and Rwandan refugees, and they massacred hundreds of thousands of them, men, women, and children. When that killing took place in 1998, there was an investigation already in 1998 around the crimes committed. The report was written by Roberto Garreton, the Garreton report, documenting the massacre of civilians. at that time, in 1998,
À cette période,
the people who actually blocked, the nation that blocked that report was the United States. So in 1998, evidence is
en
published that there is massacre
1998,
of civilians, and nothing is done. That sets the precedent that now impunity is the word of the day. That became clear that if we don't address the question of justice in 1998, there is no way that in 2020 we can talk about that. So the fact that the massacre took place, a report was published, and nothing was done about it, we are looking at 2 decades later, what is happening in justice? And this is why we are supporting the Conductor Mukwege, calling for the creation of an international tribunal for Congo. That call is very simple. There cannot be justice without peace, and peace will not take place if there is no justice, and human dignity cannot exist in DRC if there is no justice and peace in DRC. And I think we can explain more during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kambale. Thank you so much for giving that history, that background, that critical lens of 10 years ago, who was there and why, and lifting their voices up today. We turn to you next. We heard Kambale underscore the genocide. 6 million Congolese died. And that number we know has continued to increase, right? Half of them were children. Claude, you sort of lived this as a child, coming through a genocide. Can you share with us a bit of your experience, your personal story, and a lens from the perspective of the other side of the border in the Great Lakes region side?
Thank you, Amira, and thank you, Kambale. And I really appreciate you telling the story of Frank Lefevre. Rest his soul. He was a great ally and you know, somebody that was over 80 years old, standing outside the UN with the sign, release the report, my tax dollars are paying for this. You know, he was an amazing person, but I would be remiss also to say, we are now at the 10-year anniversary of the mapping report being released, but also Kambale, 10 years ago, there was an attempt on your life because of the work that you're doing. And I'm glad, you know, at the time we were doing the Break the Silence tours, I'm glad that you're still here and we're still breaking the silence. And we're gonna continue to break the silence and we're gonna shatter the silence and we're gonna get justice for the people. But just so that everybody understands, just so that you know, when you hear that 3 million children were killed, that 3 million died in the Congo and 6 million people died, you may just think this is a book or a movie. This is not real. I wanna share how real this is. When you live through a genocide, and I just want to walk you through it a little bit. I'm going to try not to be so graphic, but I survived the genocide in Rwanda, in the war. During that time, I was in the middle of bombing campaigns where people were getting killed, basically like dust, you know, bombs falling everywhere. Running around, jumping over dead bodies. At one point, I was captured in my grave, me and my mother. Thank goodness there were people like those who are on this panel and those who are following who actually put their lives in danger and pleaded for my life. Multiple times, I made it. I ended up fleeing to the Congo. And so I survived the genocide in Rwanda. And luckily, I also survived the genocide in the Congo, because I was rescued in the Congo before the bombing and the invasion of Congo shamefully by the Rwandan military and the Ugandan military. And I have a little story for you. In the late 90s, there was this seriously deadly war and genocide going on in the Congo. It's still going on today, but 1998 to 2002 was the worst. During that time, the government of Rwanda and Rwanda's President Paul Kagame kept denying that Rwanda had not invaded the Congo, that it was an internal Congolese issue. And I want to dispel the myth. They kept saying this, and then in 2002, they held a ceremony. Look it up, or we can share the link. They held a ceremony to pull the troops out, Rwandan troops out of the Congo that never invaded the Congo. So the reason why I tell my story, the reason why I share my personal story is because there are people who actually deny that these atrocities happened. I lived through these atrocities. Thankfully, I survived them. You know, share my story of, you know, just this change of the human flesh and the sky covered with, you know, a big dark cloud from the bombs and the burning and everything. These are real things. These happen to real people. These are things that I saw with my own eyes. This is what's happened in the Congo. This is what Uganda's invasion and Rwanda's invasion of the Congo has produced in the Congo. The 3 million children that died are my little brothers and my little sisters. They're your little brothers and your little sisters, your children and your grandchildren, for those of you who are watching. And this is why it's important that we continue to push on Mukwege's message. In fact, not only do the perpetrators and their supporters deny that these atrocities happened, they have threatened Dr. Denis Mukwege, a hero on the African continent, a hero in the Congo, who helps women heal from brutally being, I don't want to be graphic, but brutally being assaulted by these men who have invaded the Congo. And he's done so much wonderful work especially in the Congo. He's been recognized with a Nobel Peace Prize. But guess what the perpetrators want to do to him? They want to assassinate him. And instead of that, I'm calling that we all actually join his call for justice on the UN mapping report. And by the way, what's happening in the Congo, what the Rwandan government exported to the Congo, they also kept internally. Just a couple of examples. We talked about Paul Rusesabagina, who sheltered over 1,000 people during the genocide. But the perpetrators actually abducted him from Dubai about a month ago, took him to Rwanda, and now they're accusing him of being a terrorist. The same people who have terrorized millions of Congolese are actually accusing a person who sheltered others as a terrorist. So for those of you who have seen the film Hotel Rwanda, the real life hero of that hotel, of that film, in that film, is in custody in Rwanda in the hands of those who invaded the Congo and are accusing him of terrorism. So not only does it happen to Rwandans and the Congolese, but it's egregious that one of the leading, General James Kabarebe, one of the leading criminals without borders, as my brother Kambale and myself refer to him as, because he's committed war crimes in Uganda, in Rwanda, and also in the Congo, actually had the guts to sit on TV and threaten that. And again, that is the danger of speaking out and standing for the truth, but we will stand for the truth, and we're gonna make sure that the perpetrators are held accountable. And I got news for every single one of you perpetrators, especially the leading ones and their supporters who think that there will be no justice, that they will get away with it. We will make sure, we are determined, we are gonna make sure that there will be courts to judge those who have killed the millions of Congolese people that are documented in mapping report. And lastly, so that I can close, I want to drive home this Congo issue. There is a myth on the African continent that Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is a Pan-Africanist. Let no African, let no brother, no sister kid yourselves that Kagame is a Pan-Africanist. As Kambale explained it, he's a puppet of the West. When he commits these atrocities, it's with the support, financial, diplomatic, political, and military from the US, the UK, France, and other Western puppet masters. Thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Claude. Powerfully said, powerfully said. Judy, we turn to you now. We've already touched on the horrors of these crimes against humanity. And we know that your book has been about documenting evidence and also ensuring accountability through tribunals and mechanisms, international mechanisms of accountability. So we would love to hear your thoughts now on what is actually needed as we, as people of conscience, pursue justice in the Great Lakes region of Africa.
Thank you, Amira, for eloquently moderating this discussion. Thank you as well to Kambale and Claude for sharing your voices, compelling voices on this issue. Yes, I'll get to it. Accountability is really important. I believe that we have to mobilize and unequivocally demand that the UN Human Rights in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Commission led the mapping exercise, producing the mapping report. We have to demand that they immediately release the names of the alleged perpetrators of the most serious crimes. Now, there are a few hundred of these names. Chief among them are senior commanders of Paul Kagame's army, some of the willing executioners who are behind this violence that started in 1996. That list of alleged perpetrators is still confidential, which is scandalous. So number one, we have to take steps to pressure the UN Human Rights Commission to release that report. And I just like to say that in 1994, after 1994, the early stages of the creation of the UN tribunal to try crimes during the genocide, we saw the UN mobilize and other agencies issuing arrest warrants for alleged Hutu perpetrators of the genocide against Tutsis. We saw an incredible, almost bounty hunting exercise where people were tracked down and found, arrested, and certainly their names were made public. So we don't have a tribunal yet established, but we can certainly be able to do. We need to know who the alleged criminals are. And I would just like to say that it was shocking. Claude just mentioned James Kabarebe. It was shocking to me that Canada allowed James Kabarebe, who was one of those chief willing executioners who have authorized the killings of Congolese and Rwandan Hutu refugees. Canada invited him to a UN peacekeeping conference that was in part organized by Romeo Dallaire in 2017. This should stop. Second, as a practical measure, I think we need to mobilize this UN tribunal for the Congo. If it is established, is going to need a high standard of evidence in order to prove these crimes and prosecute these individuals. We need to organize efforts, American Bar Association, African organizations, Congolese victims, people who are interested in peace and justice in Congo, request under the Freedom of Information Act for satellite images that should be, in fact, declassified after 20 years, satellite images of those crimes being committed. Now, we know that there are around 50 military satellites that the Defense Ministry uses in the United States. We know they have access to things like Landsat, sophisticated satellites like Landsat, the Cannon Keyhole, that are able to provide evidence of fires, of burning, of disturbance of earth, of mass graves. We look at places like Lemera, Tingi Tingi, which Kambale spoke of, Biaro, Kasese, Bandaka, all the areas where Rwandan Hutu refugees and Congolese were murdered, principally by Kagame's army. We need that evidence, and we can request the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, because that's the agency that can deliver that evidence. Thirdly, I would just like to say that Africans have to take the lead in these efforts to request for accountability. What we've seen is a lot of people in the West unknowingly or knowingly obfuscate efforts to inform the world about what's actually happening on the ground. I think we need to listen to the Congolese, to Rwandans who are in exile, but particularly for this tribunal and for justice efforts to the Congolese, because it's people in Beni, in Ituri, and other places that are facing insurgency and also violence every day. They know what's happening. I don't think we need to listen to a cottage industry of white academic researchers whose research, quite frankly, is focusing on the local grievances and local ethnic problems as being the cause for some of the, the problems in Congo. I think the Congolese know exactly what has happened. They know who the principal instigators of the violence and the militias and the criminal network that exist today. And I think we need the lexicon to be created from Africans. We need Africans to control the narrative.
Powerfully said. Couldn't agree with you more. Next to Ni, one of the ones that has been, helping to shape the narrative for a long time. Ni, we know you've been following so closely not only the U.S. but other Western forces and the role that they have played in destabilizing the Great Lakes region of Africa. So we turn to you to help us pull back the lens and talk about the complicity of these external forces and what needs to happen to hold them accountable as well.
Thank you so very much, Amira. Thank you, Africans Rising. I am particularly pleased to be on the same video program with, of course, I'm quite honored to be with Kambale, Judy, and Claude. Thank you again. Yes, let me just start with picking up what Judy just said. A country like the United States, which is where I have lived for some 50 years, a country, United States, has a lot of information and capability about what has happened in the Congo. So I support completely what Judy said, that Africans have to take the lead and their voices must be heard, and that we must not be sucked in by the cottage industry of Western researchers and university people, of which, I am in the university now, so I take the point that, look, we must listen to the Africans, we get things that they are seeing and hear them. That is absolutely correct. I welcome that. A corollary to that is that there are powerful countries in the world who have information on what has happened. But beyond that, which is where I want to focus, is that these powerful countries are the ones who protect the perpetrators. Kambale, Dr. Mukwege, we hear what he called for and it hasn't been done. Why? Because powerful countries are protecting the perpetrators in the Great Lakes. And not only are they protecting them, but they have built a media image of these people. I am now teaching at graduate school at the George Washington University, and I'm stunned every time I talk to my students who tell me, well, President Kagame in Rwanda is one of the exemplary leaders of Africa. And I say, okay, tell me why you think that, and what do you know of him? So the reason that is important is that if you look back at the Congo, the area of Africa, the heart of Africa, which we now call the Congo, the DRC, has gone through a lot of trauma, even before independence. As a little boy in Accra in 1966, I saw Patrice Lumumba with my own eyes, and within a few months, he had been butchered. So the people of the Congo have been subjected to a lot of violence. But why are we focused on what has happened more recently? Why are we looking at a mapping report around massacres like Tingi? Because in those waves of violence that our brothers and sisters have lost, millions have lost their lives in the Congo. This particular one, where you've seen some 6 million, according to UN experts, 6 million people lost their lives, happened in the wake of the Rwandan genocide. And so you have to link the two. As Judy mentioned, the RPF, what is now the Army of Rwanda, the army built and led by Paul Kagame, invaded Rwanda from Uganda, where they had helped Mr. Museveni bring himself to power after losing an election. He waged a war, Mr. Museveni did, and then he pushed the Rwandan who have helped him, Paul Kagame and his friends, out, and they invaded the country from which they come as refugees. And that started a war in 1990, and 1994, the genocide happened. And then what we are focused on, once Mr. Kagame had taken over Rwanda in 1994, he pursued a lot of people, and a lot of innocent people were killed. Once again, this is the 10th anniversary of the report, which was a UN project to say we need to shine a light on these atrocities. We need to know who were killed, who killed them, where they were killed, and how many. They had to push a lot to get that job done, to give us some numbers. And then, as has been mentioned, the US and others wanted those numbers kept hidden. And so you have to understand why we are in this situation, why this particular wave of violence swept over the Rwanda and the Congo. And the point is that you have the United States. Judy mentioned the country of which she is a citizen, Canada. I think we must not also forget the UK. And so for me to wrap up is just that Judy is right. We need Africans to take lead, but this includes Africans who are in the diaspora in the United States, in Canada, in Britain, and other citizens of these powerful countries, because they are protecting and shielding the governments that have perpetrated this violence, the governments that persuade these, protect these protesters, these perpetrators. And therefore, I will land here and turn it back to Amira, but in the Q&A, we hope to go into more details about what people in these powerful Western countries can do so they stop protecting those who are responsible for the deaths of millions of Africans. Let me repeat, millions of Africans are being killed and the perpetrators are being protected, and that is unconscionable. And if you therefore live in one of these democratic countries, US, Canada, Britain, this is being done in your name.
Thank you so much, Nee. We will continue the conversation now on call to action. We've set the table. We know the context. What is it that we who are listening, people around the world, quite literally, including in Australia in the middle of the night, are with us, right? And they want to walk in solidarity and say, not on my watch. What is it that we want them to do? Let's start with you, Kambale, and then we will continue around the table.
Specific for Africans or the globe, or anyone?
I would say let's take it for Africans, for the diaspora, and for people of conscious.
The Congolese are united in the call for the creation of the tribunal. It seems as a big task or an abstract ask. A tribunal is a beginning for people to have a closure for what has happened to them. I remember the Nuremberg trial started, I think, a year after the World War II ended, right? So it was right after World War II. Imagine that Congo has been in conflict for over 2 decades, and the people on the daily basis are not getting justice. So creating the framework of having an existing tribunal is one. And the UN mapping exercise report provided models of how it could happen. And the one that the Congo supported is a creation of mixed chambers. And this chamber can look at what has happened in Sierra Leone. We can also look at the example of how Habre of Chad was tried by Africans, right? As a matter of having an independent court that cannot be tampered with either by national governments or international governments. So that's one. And Africans can do that wherever they are in the country by shaping the narrative of what is happening. Nia just shared how many Africans actually believe that Paul Kagame is an example to actually follow. And I've heard people say that he's a benevolent dictator. Tell that to the millions who have died, who are found in mass graves. They will not think that this is benevolence. Death is not benevolence. So Africans should educate themselves around what is happening there. And there are places where, the information is widely available. I always invite people to go to friendsofthecongo.org website to get information. There is a website called congojustice.org that also has information. When you have that information, allow others across the continent to know that, because it took few decades before Africans understood what was happening in South Africa during apartheid. The moment Africans understood that there were other Africans enslaved on their land, they took up that cause, that you could end up in Senegal and a teacher in the beginning of school would write on a chalkboard, apartheid is crime against humanity in many remote areas. So that's what we need to do now, is to build a global movement, a continental movement where Africans are saying one death is no longer needed in Congo. We cannot accept that in 2020, that there is an African continent that continues to suffer and supports the call from the Congolese to have a tribunal created.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Judy. The mention of tribunal makes me think we should go to you next. What is your call to action? You mentioned the UN Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights Council and others, so please.
Thank you, Amira. The one thing I just like to say, I take Kambale's point. I think it's very important to dismantle and challenge that official narrative. I mean, Africa, he's going to hear every day how Kagame has brought order to Rwanda and to Central Africa. Nothing could be further from the truth. My book re-examines the Rwandan genocide. His legitimacy rests on a falsification of actual history. He did not stop killings, he instigated them. He actually fueled genocide against the Tutsis, and he committed genocide against Hutus. Then he unleashed his war in Congo. So counter it, dismantle it, and tell the truth. I think my work is always on evidence, and so I approach it through that prism. I do think that what's very interesting, what's happening now, is people are lobbying their members of Congress, but also their elected representatives. We've seen the European Parliament now being approached, individual members being approached by people who support Dr. Mukwege's work. They're asking the European Parliament and parliaments worldwide to put pressure on the UN Security Council, because this is the crux of the issue. The Security Council has to approve this this tribunal. And so lobby your elected officials. We need to do it in Canada. We need to do it across Africa, of course, certainly in Congo, but we need to do it in the United States, because the United States, as Nee mentioned, has sponsored these criminals, has protected them actively. So there's really a lot of work to be done, but it's within our reach, and this is practical work.
Thank you so much, Judy. Nee, we go to you. That lays it up very well. For those in the US, what should they be doing?
Yes, very, very much so. You know, we have the Congress, we have the Senate of 100 members, and they have a lot of influence and power. Judy just mentioned, for the first step towards doing this, what Dr. Mukwege has called for, the UN Security Council. There are 5 members there that are permanent and who have a veto. So if they don't want anything to be done, it won't be done. And if they do want something to be done, they will push and it will be done. The US is one of them. And of course, everybody knows the UN is in the United States. So people in the United States, from African immigrants to people of African descent, of which there are 40 million, to a huge network of people of goodwill, Americans of goodwill, who I know for a fact support Africa and want the right thing done, want their government to do the right thing. They need to do a number of things, push their government to push for the UN to trigger these investigations, this tribunal that are being asked for. You have to push your members to do that. But you see, that will have to follow up by understanding that we have been lied to. It is that simple. Our vision, our understanding of what has been going on in the Great Lakes, where Paul Kagame has been painted as the exemplary African leader, where he has delivered services, he has done A, B, and C. He was trained in the United States. His son was trained in the United States. And here, so far, I'm emphasizing the government and therefore what people must do as those of us who have elected the government and pay taxes. But in addition, support for Paul Kagame in the US goes beyond the US government. Foundations who think he's a great guy. I know businesses. I know universities that give him award, universities that invite him to come and speak as Africa's future. When I see that, it is unbelievable. So my point is the second thing that people in the United States must do, maybe it even comes before pushing their government, is to educate themselves. The same thing that Judy has mentioned, the same thing that Kambale has mentioned. Please question the conventional wisdom. Double check whatever anybody, including us, tell you, because Mr. Kagame has been giving a false image. And I focus on him because the 7 million people that have been killed, the Congo, for all of its difficulties in governance, have had elections that have been questioned, but they have changed leaders. Mr. Kagame has been in power since 1994. Don't let anyone tell you, as soon as the genocide was over, he was in charge. He's been in power, and of course that ties to Mr. Rusesabagina. His real crime is that he has the nerve to say he wants change in Rwanda. And so educate ourselves here in the US, and we have democratic room to put pressure on our government to push for change to come to the Great Lakes, beginning with Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Nee. And we'll add to that, make sure you're registered and vote. We're too close to a critical election to not emphasize that point. Claude,
Precisely.
We turn to you now. Call to action for those in the region, on the continent, in the diaspora, and elsewhere.
I think a lot of it has been covered, but let me start with us, Africans. We must tell our own story. And as has been said and repeated, we cannot let the Western academics and media lead the charge in telling our story. We must own our story. We must take our destiny in our own hands. And how do we do that? There's number one, we tell our own stories. Number two, when our brothers and sisters are telling their stories, we need to believe them versus, we have this tendency to think when a white person says something, it has more value than a black person. We have these lived experiences. Listen to the lived experiences of the people. Let's act accordingly. When somebody tells you that a street is clean in Kigali, it's all nice. But when people are being cleaned off of it, that's your brothers and sisters that are being cleaned off of it. when somebody tells you that people are getting killed in the Congo, don't think it's simply just a Congolese issue when the neighbors are invading the country. Hold each other accountable. We are our brothers' keepers. We are our sisters' keepers, and we need to keep our brothers and sisters safe by making sure not only we recognize who these perpetrators are, but join the movement in terms of right now, everybody watching, most of you watching, you have social media. Spread the news. Let the world know. And this was my wish when I was digging my own grave. I knew I was gonna die, but I wanted the world to know. Let the world know what is happening to our sisters and brothers in the Congo and who's doing it. And then join Dr. Mukwege's call for the tribunals to be set up. If you don't know how, listen to what Kambale said. He provided the resources and how you can actually follow. This is for everybody around the world. This isn't just for Africans. This isn't just for the us in the diaspora. This is the whole world. Inform yourselves. Let's follow the lead that Dr. Mukwege is pushing for. Let's push for these tribunals to be set up. Yes, it takes the UN Security Council, but guess what? Apartheid South Africa stayed and was perpetuated because people didn't know what was happening. When the world stood up and went against it, it changed. We also have the opportunity to make that change now in our lifetimes and have these tribunals set up. Yesterday's fight against apartheid in South Africa is today's fight for justice in the Great Lakes region of Africa. We must get rid of dictators. There is no good dictator. Benevolent dictators are not good. There is no good dictator. We've got to get rid of those guys. And we need to have the people who actually represent the people. And so, if you are a taxpayer in a Western country, you must demand your government to stop supporting these dictators, especially military support. Dictators, and I'll name them. We've got Paul Kagame, we've got Yoweri Museveni, and by the way, the Congo today is hostage to dictator Joseph Kabila, who is also one of the perpetrators in this mapping report. They must be held accountable. They must actually serve time for the lives, the African lives that they took. And if you are a taxpayer, you must demand your government to stop the support. Use your social media to spread the news. And 3, Africans, let's tell our stories. Let's own our own destiny. Let's let the world know what is happening to our people and bring a man to actually make this happen.
Thank you so much for the clarity of your calls to action, for your courage and dedication to justice. I want to just to underscore, when we say Black Lives Matter, that means whether it is in Missouri or in the DR Congo or in Rwanda, Black Lives Matter. And we must, as people committed to building a more healthy world, we must demand justice for all who have so brutally dehumanized, rendered invisible Black lives. So I can't thank all of you enough for using this space to elevate your voice. All of the organizations that have been a part of this convening are committed to raising the voice and amplifying the power of Black voices. From the Black Alliance for Peace, to the Friends of the Congo, to the Great Lakes Action Network, to Africans Rising, which started to create a platform for social movements on the continent and in the diaspora to elevate their voice in the calls for rights, for dignity, for justice, for peace. There could be no better place than joining these organizations, standing in solidarity together to push for the changes so needed, not only for the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Rwanda or the Great Lakes, but for the survival of this planet and the people on it. So we thank all of you who have already asked questions and gave comments Keep them coming. We ask all of the presenters again to say what are those websites that people need to go to keep attuned on the activism around these issues. How can we demand that the UN, which puts out a report a decade ago, doesn't put that report on a shelf, but ensures that justice flows, accountability flows from the investigations that were evidenced in that report? So we join forces. We say change is possible. It feels tough right now in these challenging times, but it's possible. We've heard the examples of the anti-apartheid struggle raised with us today. We've heard those examples. We know colonialism was a hard-fought battle. It's still going on today, but victories have happened along the way. And we know that justice will be served if we all stand in solidarity together. So we call again for freedom, unconditional release of Paul Rusesabagina and all political prisoners that have been unjustly detained. We call for collective action and accountability through tribunals. We urge mixed chambers tribunals. I'm from Liberia, so in the case of Sierra Leone and Liberia, we have examples that have worked. Let's use those examples to work now for true justice to be served in the DR Congo, in the Great Lakes region, and beyond. So we ask all the presenters, please, say again, what are the websites? Where can people who are responding to the calls for action to stay connected? Please share those both on the chat and verbally so that those joining us on all the other platforms can also join beyond today to continue the actions that will flow from today. So we turn over to Kumba as our co-coordinator of Africans Rising to help us to navigate the Q&A in the multiple languages as she so beautifully can handle. And we ask everyone to stay tuned, stay woke, take action. Justice will be ours.
Thank you so much, Amira. I'm sitting here, you know, my eyes are watering as I listen to you and how beautifully you put this. I've been watching, you know, listening to you and mainly reading, you know, the comments and the question. And I know you've been looking at some of them also. A lot of comments are coming, thanking you for the work you are doing. Some comments are coming, you know, challenging and bringing the other narrative and defending and talking against you, even challenging who you are as people and your own experience of life that you've shared here. I mean, the level of violence of that is unfathomable. But there are also many questions that people are asking because there seems to be a real hunger for change to happen. And people, and I know you've touched some of these points already, maybe we need to come back to them. People are asking and they're wondering, the tribunal, is that the way? Will it work? How, you know, how do we make sure it's gonna be what we expect it to be? People are also, you know, really looking at trying to understand how did we get here? How does, you know, how does it work? The mechanism of controlling such narrative, like how can truth be buried so deeply that you know, almost, I mean, you hear the opposite. I mean, Judy, you've been speaking about things and discovering things. How come the opposite of reality becomes the narrative that most people hear about? You know, people are trying to figure out how these things you know, happen and how does it work. We've got also several testimonies, of course, people who are refugees, people who live through some of these experiences, who also are sharing. I will come back to each of you to speak to some of the question. I will make, I think, the economy of some of these challenges, because I think as people that listen, everyone listen and read. When it makes sense, we know it. When questions are genuine, we also can feel it. So I would like you to take on, because today who we're trying to talk to are people that are ready to really help push this, get the truth out, engage Africans on the continent, in the diaspora, but also just people